This book series taught me not to romanticize history. There is good and bad, and in the middle is humanity. Hi, hello, ¿cómo estás? I am Jan. Welcome to my channel. This is where we discuss books, nostalgia, and the places where these things meet in the middle. Fun fact, the first four books of this series match up with the colors of the four Cahill branches. Blue for Tomas, green for Janice, red for Lucian, and yellow for Ekaterina. This is when I gotta start putting in trigger warnings for all the things one might expect from a 2000s book series. Fat phobia, racism, exotification of cultures, all those things. So be prepared for that in this next installment and a lot of installments coming in the future. Our adventure begins in Cairo, Egypt, specifically the Al Khalil market, where Amy has just lost sight of her annoying younger brother, Dan. She stopped to buy a Nefertiti pencil, and I know she paid tourist prices for that small trinket. Amy is complaining to herself about how crowded it is, but girl, you was just in Tokyo not too long ago.
Oh my God, pull yourself together!
Anyway, they stopped at the market on their way to their hotel from the airport. So this can't be less than a week after the events of One False Note. All in all, it's probably been no more than 4 weeks since the passing of Grace Cahill. 4 weeks, and they've been to Paris, Vienna, Salzburg, Venice, Tokyo, and Seoul. Now they're in Cairo. Amy spots her brother, as well as a suspicious tourist reaching out towards him. She races through the crowd, and at the last second, reaches out with the pencil, where a needle embeds itself. It's cousin Irina Spassky, who tried to poison Dan. Amy and Dan make a break for it, less than 3 pages, and we are running for our lives, for the umpteenth time. They run down a few paths until they are able to hide in a cafe, but it doesn't last long before their cousin walks into the cafe. They hide behind a fat man, which this part feels weirdly dehumanizing, and run out a side exit into an alley. They see a shop with a Saket statue in it and run inside to check it out. Turns out the statue is a fake, which they wouldn't have known if not for this nice British man named Theo, the first Egyptian citizen they meet, and they're depicted as a scammer. The Cahills also mention Napoleon's connection to Egypt. He invaded Egypt in the 1700s. Theo is kind enough to take them back to Nellie, telling them along the way that he lived in Cairo. Nellie bought a bunch of new accessories and makeup, and is described, and I quote, "She looked as though she were about to run to a hip-hop harem." Anyway, Theo offers to show them a museum nearby called Sonari House, originally built in 1794. He takes them on a tour of the place, recounting Napoleon's conquest and the creation of Western Egyptology. Amy and Dan wander off on their own, defacing museum property in the process of finding clue with the Lucian crest on a tile. Behind it, Dan finds a leather tube, but barely has time to admire it before a security guard spots them. They're given chase by museum security, having to jump off the second floor again to escape the museum with Nellie in a taxi. While in the taxi, they examine an old scroll they found inside the tube. On it is part of a French letter about some clue being sent by Lucians to some palace in Paris. Also, the initials BD. They arrive at the hotel and sign in under Alistair O's name. It gets them into the Aswan suite, which has a secret floor in it. This leads Dan and Amy onto the other side of their suite, which is an Ekaterina stronghold. They get locked in and begin exploring the Ekaterina HQ, noting all the famous inventors like Thomas Edison, Marie Curie, but Amy also learns about the bad stuff they invented, like chemical warfare and atomic weaponry. They realize their family has as much wickedness in it as it does good, and they question whether they should really trust even Grace. They find 3 lion-headed goddess statues and read about the Ecats who discovered them. They were hidden by Catherine Cahill. Napoleon's expedition yielded the first, and a map was found inside. Howard Carter found the second, but it was solid. And Bai O found the third one, which also had a map inside of it. Bai O shows up himself and announces how he thinks Alistair O has the real statue. He was tipped off that someone made a reservation under his name. He thought it was Alistair himself. Bay questions them as to his whereabouts and decides to try exchanging information. He gives up intel about the Saket statues, like Bernardo Drovetti, another Lucian, being the one who sent the statue to the Louvre in Paris. Bai also makes a point of trying to say that the stronghold serves as a lesson of the great good and evil the ECATs are able of producing. That's why he designed it the way it is. It's a monument to innovation. When he asks them to comply, they lie and say Alistair is dead. Bai then traps them in a large plastic box to contain them. Cut to Irina Spassky thinking angrily to herself about how she let the Cahills give her the slip. She goes on to think about the alliance the Lucians made to try and take down Grace, because they felt she had gotten her hands on too many clues. This alliance eventually led to the death of Arthur and Hope Cahill in a house fire. Irina remembers Grace in her grief, and she wishes she could have comforted her, to tell her that she too had lost a child. Irina is feeling haunted by the specter of the past, of fear and loss and tragedy. She has PTSD for crying out loud. You're not really a Cahill without some trauma. Back with Amy and Dan, they try to stay calm as they try to conserve oxygen and not panic. Nellie, meanwhile, realizes something is wrong and after investigating the room a bit, finds the umbrella and figures out the lock. She then is able to use hummus to spring Dan and Amy from their plexiglass prison. They decide to change hotels. Bio is talking with the men in black when he spots the Cahills trying to escape. He motions for security to capture his conversation. He doesn't see that in the driveway a car pulls up and an older woman is behind the wheel. She introduces herself as Hilary Vale and says she has a message from Grace. They get in and quickly race to Hilary's home. There she tells them how she was friends with Grace, having met in a U.S. boarding school during World War II. She tells them Grace left them a letter, Grace's travel guidebook, and that she had a promise to keep. She was to give them something that was kept in a safety deposit box for over 50 years. When she pulls it out, it is an emerald-eyed golden Saket statue. She asks if they want to authenticate it, mentioning that she knows the guy. The guy she knows is Theo, the guy they ran into in the market. Hilary is his grandmother. Amy and Dan lie to them and open the Saket, discovering a papyrus scroll with a letter from Catherine Cahill and a map of a tomb. When Dan examines it, he realizes all three tomb maps together lined up reveal the actual tomb's layout. He then pulls out a book and shows them a map he memorized of the tomb of Queen Nefertari, wife of King Ramses II. Theo offers to get them access to the tomb in Luxor, so the next day they take a flight there. At the airport, they see Jonah and Broderick Wizard, but Jonah says bomb in an airport and is immediately seized by security. There was a cute moment before where Jonah's facade slips and he whines to his dad about not being known in Egypt. It's so childish. These poor babies, all of them. Also, his dad calls him Joni, which was also adorable. They also receive a note with an Egyptian embalming tool, possibly a threat. In Luxor, Theo, Dan, Amy, and Nellie are going to stay on a sailboat. Theo and Nellie will check out about passes to the tomb. Meanwhile, Amy and Dan will check out the temple of Hatshepsut. There they examine hieroglyphics for clues, examining how Hatshepsut was a queen who called herself Pharaoh, and how she journeyed to Punt and was given the gift of myrrh trees. They also spot Jonah and his dad at the temple. Nellie and Theo show up with news that the tomb is currently closed to visitors. But Theo talked them into allowing them a pass, and then he sneaks out a back entrance, avoiding the wizards. At the tomb, they get 10 minutes to examine it before they have to leave again, as the tomb is very, very fragile. When they get back to the boat, they find a threatening note, warning them about a curse. When thinking over the tomb, they realize they should have examined the steps and need to get back into it. Cut to Irina destroying a historical site to break into the tomb and look for a clue. She is seen examining the artwork and is overcome with rare emotions. Back with Amy and Dan, they arrive at the tomb and are surprised to find the door unlocked before wandering in. They barely get the chance to examine a series of hieroglyphic clues they found on the steps before the lights go out, and they hear the metal clang of the door of the tomb closing. When they hear a strange noise in the dark, Amy and Dan decide to hide out in the burial chamber, getting there as quickly as possible.
Where the hell did they come from? I ain't waiting around to find out!
They don't know Irina is also in the burial chamber. She ponders poisoning or using an explosive to cause a cave-in, just to scare them a bit. She eventually decides against it, overcome with emotion for the art and majesty around her. Instead, she follows the strange noise in the dark. Nellie arrives saving the children, telling them she was worried over them. Then Theo arrives, telling Nellie he was worried over her. Amy and Dan realize they lost Grace's guidebook, losing a vital piece of the puzzle to help them on their quest. They try to decode the glyphs they did find. They can't make heads or tails of it, and begin to think they may be looking in the wrong spot before realizing the boat is no longer docked. Jonah had overheard their mention of Paris, as he and his father had boat-napped them. The wizards leave them on an island in the middle of the Nile, but they were now headed in the wrong direction. Stuck in the dark in this wilderness when a crocodile begins to chase them across the island. When they reach a beach on the other side, a fisherman is there and is able to rescue them on his felucca. He is very kind and takes them back to shore, and they walk back to the boat. They don't tell Nellie and Theo what happened and go inside to discuss the clues. They figure out the next clue is pointing towards Aswan. They also point out that the clues have all been related to women, queens, pharaohs, goddesses. Even the glyphs hint at Isis, husband of Osiris. They get into an argument, and Amy thinks to herself how much they resembled Cahills in that moment. At the airport in Aswan, Amy almost has her fanny package stolen, the one with the statue of Saket in it. At the Old Cataract Hotel, they receive another threatening note, this one with an image of Osiris. They complain about the heat again, for the 100th time. On Angelica Island, they examine the Temple of Isis, but are shocked to discover it's a recreation, the original island being flooded by the building of the Aswan Dam. Dan and Amy reconcile and make up. That night, Amy awakes to find the statue missing and through the window spots Theo making a beeline towards a car. She doesn't think, just hauls ass and starts running after him. She is joined by Nellie, still in her PJs, who tackles Theo. We also catch Hillary behind the wheel. Turns out, they've been trying to steal the statue this whole time. Hillary was the one who tried to cut off Amy's fanny pack earlier. Theo admits Irina paid him off for the statue when he ran into her in the tomb, but Amy thinks they should strike a bargain instead of involving the police. They use Theo to double-cross Irina, tricking her by giving her a scroll with a fake clue leading her to Morocco. Irina thinks she outsmarted everyone. She received an old photograph and a painting of Grace's. The painting is a clue of where to find the next clue, but before they can say more, Dan and Amy figure out that the room is bugged. When Nellie comes in, they tell her to cover for them while they go search for whoever bugged their room. In the lobby, they find Alistair spying on them. He claims to want to form an alliance with them, again, saying he needed to fake his death to help them. Amy agrees to trust him for now.
You can't keep getting away with it!
And Alistair uses his personal submersible to help them explore the underwater ruins of Philae. When they get there, Amy and Dan spot a clue carved into the stone that reads KC for Catherine Cahill and also half GM capital M. The rest is broken off. Amy thinks the M stands for Madrigals, who got there first. She wonders who these Madrigals could be. But then the submersible has several system failures at once, stranding them on the underwater island. Dan comes up with the idea to push the sub from the inside.
We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else!
They do so, shoving the sub towards a current. The current takes the craft to the surface, where they rowed ashore. Alistair splits, telling them he's going to his library in his home to research more. Amy and Dan retrace their hints so far, going back to Grace's letter. In it, they find that she had already left a clue for half a gram. They didn't need to go to the submerged island. They also figure out they need to head back to Cairo, to where she bought the statue's base at. They find the shop in Cairo and question the shopkeeper. He at first doesn't give them much, but he is convinced otherwise once he realizes who they are and their connection to Grace Cahill. She knew his grandfather and father and entrusted them with a box for safekeeping.
Isn't there anything on that isn't about boxes?
Amy and Dan go over what they know about Grace, only to realize they do trust her. They also realize the password can only be one thing, Saladin. Inside is an image of a leaf from an unknown plant and the annotation MAT 211 and now all they have to do is identify it. Back in the Ekaterina stronghold, they're unsuccessful in their research until they remember the postcard she sent with the image of the Magi bringing gifts to the manger. Amy reaches for a Bible and comes away with the word myrrh. Dan looks it up and it matches their plant.
They're the same picture.
She tells him the connection to Hatshepsut and how the annotation was a clue to the Bible verse Matthew 2:11. They have a moment where they celebrate that grace never led them astray and is still with them. These kids were doubting the one person they thought they could trust because of all the trauma they've been through in the last month. But the celebration is cut short by a thump next door. In the stronghold, they find it's been ransacked and a threatening letter M was left behind, a sign of the Madrigals. With that mysterious conclusion, we leave our protagonist with another successful clue hunt. Where do they go from here? Can they trust Uncle Alistair? Who are these Madrigals? Find out next time on the next installment of Brief Recaps. Don't forget to like, leave a comment with your thoughts below, and subscribe to my channel for more. Bye!